Sell the house and the money is ours. Those were the first words I heard as the graduation band played and confetti rained down. I stood frozen in the middle of the cheering crowd, my heart slamming in my chest. My son Marcus had just hugged his girlfriend Sienna on stage, his cap tilted, his smile wide. But his voice carried enough for me to catch those words. My knees almost buckled. I had come to surprise him, to cheer for the moment I thought was the reward for my life's sacrifice. Instead, I heard the sound of betrayal slip from his own mouth. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. This one will stay with you long after it ends. My name is Evelyn. I am 66 years old. All I ever wanted was to see my only child succeed. That day at the university field, I thought I was about to burst with pride. The bleachers were packed, parents waving banners, graduates tossing their caps, professors shaking hands. I squeezed through the crowd, my camera in one hand, a small gift bag in the other. I planned to catch Marcus by surprise when the ceremony ended, throw my arms around him, and tell him how proud I was. I imagined his smile, the way his eyes used to light up when he was a boy. But as I pushed closer, I saw him on stage with Sienna. She leaned into him, her perfect hair falling over her shoulders. Their hug looked tender to the crowd, but I heard her whisper right into his ear. "Are you sure your mum will sign without asking questions?" My stomach clenched. Marcus answered, his tone cold. "She will. She has no choice. Once the papers are signed, the house worth 450,000, the savings, the insurance, we're set." My throat went dry. The band played loud and the audience clapped, but in my ears their voices cut sharper than any trumpet. I stood there, half hidden behind a row of parents, holding my breath so no one would notice me. Sienna laughed softly and said, "Your mum won't suspect a thing. One small accident, and it looks natural. No one will ever question it." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Then we can finally move into the subdivision we want." The sound of those words made me feel as if the ground had cracked beneath me. This was my son, the boy I raised alone, the boy I thought I had poured every ounce of love and sacrifice into. Yet there he was, planning my end in broad daylight, wrapped in his graduation robe. I tried to move, but my legs felt like stone. Around me, parents cheered as names were called, graduates crossing the stage to applause. To them, it was a day of joy. To me, it was the day I realized my child was not my child anymore. I wanted to scream his name, to shout over the crowd, but my voice stayed buried. Instead, I clutched the gift bag to my chest, the small token I had brought for him now feeling like a mockery. I replayed his words in my head again and again. 450,000. Savings, insurance, not love, not gratitude, just numbers, just calculations. He spoke like a stranger, as if I were nothing more than a ledger to be closed. The crowd roared when the dean announced the class of graduates. Hats flew in the air. I watched Marcus raise his arms in victory, confetti sticking to his robe, his smile wide for the cameras. Sienna clapped beside him, her eyes shining. And me, his mother, I stood in the crowd, invisible, crushed by the weight of what I had just heard. When the music faded, I stepped back, careful not to let him see me. My body trembled, not from excitement, but from a cold fear I had never known. The world cheered for a graduate. I stared at a traitor. That was the beginning, the moment everything I believed about my son shattered. The day of his triumph became the day of my awakening. And as I left the field, swallowed by the noise of the crowd, I knew this was not just a graduation. It was the start of a battle I never imagined I would have to fight. I walked away from the graduation field with my heart pounding so hard I thought the whole crowd could hear it. My hands shook as I clutched the bag with the gift I had brought for Marcus, the bag that now felt ridiculous in its innocence. I went straight to my car, shut the door, and sat there staring at the steering wheel. The voices of Marcus and Sienna played in my head on a loop. Their words about my house, my savings, and the insurance were louder than the cheers I had just heard from the audience. I tried to breathe, but each breath came short and sharp. I drove home on instinct. The streets blurred. When I finally parked in front of my house, I stayed in the car for a long time before forcing myself inside. Every wall of that house carried years of memories. Each photo, each mark on the furniture, told the story of a life built from nothing. And all I could hear was my son planning to strip it from me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The sacrifices, the choices, the exhaustion that became part of my life for decades. I had been on my own since Marcus was a toddler. His father walked out when he was barely 4. I had no safety net, no one to lean on, just me and a boy who looked at me like I was his whole world. I started working double shifts when Marcus entered grade school. I typed letters at a desk by day, then scrubbed offices at night for extra money. My body ached constantly, but I never let Marcus see that side of me. I always wanted him to believe everything was under control. When bills piled up, I skipped meals so he could eat. When school projects needed supplies, I cut back on heat in the winter to afford them. One year the car broke down. Repairing it cost nearly a month's wages. I rode the bus back and forth in the dark, carrying groceries in both hands, sometimes with snow soaking through my shoes. I told Marcus the car was in the shop longer than expected so he wouldn't feel guilty. He believed me because I smiled through it. As he got older, his needs grew. Computers, books, sports fees. Other parents could write a check without thinking twice. For me, each request meant hours of cleaning or typing or cooking for someone else. I sold jewelry I had inherited, the last pieces that connected me to my own mother. The money went straight to tuition and uniforms. Marcus never knew. I didn't want him to know. I wanted him free of the weight that had pinned me down my whole life. By the time he reached high school, I had saved enough to cover the first year of college. I remember the day we toured the campus. His eyes lit up like nothing I had ever seen. He said, "Mum, I can see myself here." I nodded, hiding the fear that nearly drowned me. I had no idea how I would manage the rest of the tuition, but in that moment, his excitement erased every doubt. I worked overtime, every weekend, every holiday. I missed weddings, birthdays, family gatherings. My world narrowed to 2 things: work and Marcus. The number 28,000 haunted me. That was the cost of 1 year at the university he wanted. I kept a small notebook where I wrote down every dollar saved, every sacrifice made, every extra shift taken. When exhaustion crushed me, I opened that notebook and reminded myself why I kept going. There was one winter in particular that nearly broke me. The company I worked for cut hours, and I had to take on side jobs cleaning houses in the evening space. I remember my hands cracking from the chemicals, bleeding into the rags I used. I would bandage them at night and go back the next day. I told myself it was temporary. It had to be. Marcus was always the top of his class. Teachers praised him, told me he had a bright future. Those words fueled me. I thought if I could just keep him in school, keep him on track, one day he would break the cycle of struggle that had defined our family. I believed in him more than I had ever believed in myself. When he finally left for college, I sat alone in this house and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief that I had made it that far. Every dollar, Every sleepless night had led to that moment. I thought it was the turning point for both of us. I thought my life of sacrifice had finally bought him a life of freedom. Now, sitting in that same house years later, I realized I had been wrong. The boy I raised, the boy I bled for, was no longer the boy I knew. Somewhere along the way, he had changed. Maybe it was the people he surrounded himself with. Maybe it was the taste of wealth and comfort he never had to earn. But the voice I heard at graduation was not the voice of the child who once clung to my hand at the bus stop. The next morning, I walked through the house and looked at everything differently. The photographs on the mantel, the old desk in the corner, the cracked tiles in the kitchen. Each of those things had been bought with my labor, my sacrifice. And yet to Marcus and Sienna, they were nothing more than numbers in a plan. 450,000, 60,000, 120,000. They saw me as an obstacle standing between them and their dream. I stood by the window and let the morning light fall on me. I told myself I needed to remember every sacrifice in detail, not because I wanted pity, but because I needed to anchor myself in the truth. My life had not been meaningless. My choices had not been worthless. And if Marcus thought he could erase all that with a signature and a staged accident, he was wrong. That day, the grief inside me shifted. It no longer felt like a weight pressing me down. It became fuel. My memories of sacrifice turned into something harder, sharper. I knew I could not undo the past, but I could decide what happened next. The days after graduation passed in a blur, but the words I had overheard refused to leave me. I carried them like stones in my chest, each hour heavier than the last. I kept telling myself maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe Marcus had been caught in a moment of foolishness, saying things he did not mean. But the small signs began to appear, and soon there was no denying them. Marcus called me the day after the ceremony. His voice was warm, even cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. "Mum, how are you feeling? The crowd was wild yesterday. Did you make it home safe?" I answered calmly, forcing my tone to match his. He didn't ask if I had seen him after the ceremony. He didn't wonder why I had not hugged him. He simply moved straight to practical matters. "Listen, I've been thinking. That old house of yours is getting harder to manage, isn't it? The stairs, the roof, all those repairs. It might be smart to sell before something breaks down completely." I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. His words carried a weight I had never noticed before. He spoke as if the house was already gone, as if my life inside those walls was an inconvenience. I said, "I've managed this long. I know every corner of this place." He laughed lightly, but there was no warmth. "Of course, Mum. But think about your future. You could move somewhere smaller, safer. It would give you peace of mind." The following week, Sienna stopped by unexpectedly. She stood in my kitchen, looking around with sharp eyes that never rested in one place. She ran her hand across the counter, then glanced at the loose tile near the sink. "You really should get that fixed. Accidents happen so easily in a house this old." I told her I had lived here more than 30 years without a serious fall. She smiled politely. "Still, you never know. One wrong step and it could all change." Her words lingered long after she left. I stood at that same counter staring at the tile she had pointed out. For the first time in my life, I felt unsafe in my own home. Not because of the tile, but because of the intent behind her voice. 2 days later, Marcus visited with a folder under his arm. He set it on the table and opened it casually while I made tea. Inside were glossy brochures of modern apartments, all on one level, located in new subdivisions with bright paint and landscaped lawns. Look at these, Mum, he said, sliding one toward me. Single story, no stairs, everything updated. Imagine living here instead of worrying about creaky floors and old wiring. I glanced at the price printed at the bottom, 380,000. My stomach tightened. He added, "You could sell this house for about 450. Add in your savings, and you'd be comfortable for years." I asked him where he got the figure for the value of my home. He shrugged. "Sienna's father knows real estate. He said the market is strong. He'd be willing to connect you with an agent." He said it so smoothly, as if it were a favor, as if the suggestion had no shadow behind it. That night I checked my bank book, the savings account I had built little by little over decades. 60,000. Not much compared to what others might have, but to me it was a fortress built from years of labor. I thought of Marcus mentioning it so casually, as if he knew every detail. I had never shared those numbers with him. The realization left me cold. The next weekend, I attended a small neighborhood gathering. My friend Rosa noticed how quiet I had become. She asked if I was well, and I almost broke down right there. Instead, I smiled and said I was fine. Later, as the evening ended, I overheard Rosa talking with another neighbor about seeing Marcus at the bank with Sienna's father. They looked worried, almost desperate, she said. Howard was waving papers around, and Marcus just kept nodding. Something about a loan. I stepped away quickly before they saw me listening, my heart thudding. That night in bed, I pieced it together. Their conversations about selling my house, the sudden interest in my savings, the way Sienna inspected every floor in my home as if she were calculating risk. They were circling me, testing the edges, waiting for me to stumble. I felt like prey inside my own life. The following morning, Marcus called again. His voice carried that same false brightness. "Mum, have you thought more about moving? Sienna and I just want the best for you. These old places can be dangerous. Remember how slippery the stairs get in winter." He paused, as if waiting for me to agree. "It would be such a relief knowing you were safe." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. I wanted to ask him directly, to shout at him for plotting with his girlfriend about my life. Instead, I said softly, "I'll think about it." His satisfied tone on the other end told me everything I needed to know. From that point on, I began noticing even smaller things. A loose rug at the top of the stairs suddenly seemed like a threat. A dim light bulb in the hallway felt like an ambush waiting to happen. Their words had turned my home into a stage where I could see every possible accident laid out before me. One evening, after locking the doors and checking the windows twice, I sat in the living room with the brochures Marcus had left. I stared at the glossy images of bright kitchens and spotless hallways. They looked clean, safe, controlled. But underneath them, I saw the reality. Each page represented a future they wanted, a future where I no longer existed. I knew then the whispers I had overheard were not a mistake. They were a plan, slowly unfolding in front of me. The house I had poured my life into had become the target. My savings, the insurance, all of it had been tallied like items on a bill. And behind their polite smiles and gentle words, Marcus and Sienna were already living as if I were gone. I folded the brochures and tucked them back into the folder. My hands trembled, but not from fear alone. A colder, sharper feeling began to take shape inside me. I realized I could no longer wait and hope this was all in my imagination. The signs were clear. The danger was real. And if I wanted to survive, I had to prepare for what was coming. The evening, I could no longer deny the truth, began with a simple dinner invitation. Marcus called early that morning. His tone was smooth, almost too cheerful. "Mum, Sienna and I want to take you out tonight. That Italian place you liked. We think it's time we spent more family time together. I hesitated, but I agreed. I knew better than to refuse. I spent the afternoon moving slowly through the house, my thoughts heavy. I picked out a dress, one of the few I had bought new in the past decade. I looked in the mirror and tried to imagine it was a normal evening, that my son wanted nothing more than to share a meal with me. But the weight in my chest reminded me that was not true anymore. When they arrived, Marcus hugged me quickly at the door. His eyes avoided mine. Sienna kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp and overwhelming. We walked to their car. Marcus opened the back door for me, smiling, but his hands trembled slightly. The drive was filled with light conversation, small talk about his work, her family, their future plans. I listened in silence, nodding at the right places. My mind was focused on the undercurrent, the way their voices dipped when they thought I wasn't paying close attention. At the restaurant, the hostess seated us near the back. Sienna took charge immediately, ordering wine before I could even open the menu. She leaned toward me with that polished smile. "You should try the seafood pasta, Evelyn. It's the most expensive dish here, and you deserve to enjoy yourself." The words sounded generous, but her eyes glittered in a way that made my stomach twist. Marcus asked about my health. "Have you been feeling steady on your feet, Mum? The stairs at your place must be tough. Have you had any dizziness lately?" I forced a smile. "I've managed fine. I know every step in that house." He nodded as if taking notes. The conversation turned sharper when Sienna set her glass down. "We worry about you. Houses like yours can become dangerous so fast. A rug out of place, a broken railing. Accidents happen." I held her gaze and said nothing. Her words were meant to be kind on the surface, but the intent was clear. As dinner went on, Marcus shifted the topic to paperwork. "Mum, have you thought about updating your will? Laws change, and it's important everything is clear. I can help with that. Make sure everything is in order." I felt the blood drain from my face. He was calm, professional, like he was discussing a client's file. But I was not a client. I was his mother. I nodded slowly, giving him no reason to press further. Inside, though, I felt something break. Every suspicion, every warning from Rosa, every offhand comment from Sienna was no longer shadow. It was all real. My son was preparing for my death. After dessert, they insisted on driving me home. The car ride was silent except for the hum of traffic. When we reached my house, Marcus parked and turned to me. "Let us walk you in, Mum. It's dark, and we don't want you tripping." His hand was gentle on my arm, but the pressure was firm. As we climbed the stairs, I felt their eyes on every detail. Marcus touched the loose railing, remarking softly, "This could be dangerous." Sienna pointed at the rug near the landing. "If that slips under your feet, you could fall straight down." I unlocked the door and stepped inside, their presence heavy behind me. Once inside, Sienna wandered through the rooms as if inspecting. She paused by the staircase again. "You really should get better lighting here. At your age, visibility is everything." She smiled, but her words were sharp. Marcus stood beside me, his tone full of concern. "Mum, we just want you safe. Promise me you'll think about moving soon." I agreed with a quiet yes, though my chest ached with fury. I walked them to the door, hugged Marcus lightly, and let them go. Their car pulled away, leaving me in the silence of my home. I stood in the hallway, staring at the rug and the railing they had pointed out. For years, Sion, those details had been nothing but ordinary parts of my life. Now they looked like traps, highlighted for future use. I felt the walls closing in, as if my house had turned into a stage for the accident they wanted me to have. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the brochures Marcus had left still tucked in the folder. I opened them again, looking at the bright photographs of spotless apartments. Their dream of a new subdivision was painted across those glossy pages. My death was the price of their dream. I poured myself a glass of water and forced myself to think clearly. The truth was undeniable. The dinner had stripped away the last fragments of hope. My son was no longer the boy I had raised. He was a man planning my end, coached and supported by the woman he loved. And I knew then I could no longer pretend it might pass. The danger was not in the future. It was here, now, growing sharper with each visit, each suggestion, each false smile. I felt fear, yes, but beneath it, something colder began to take root. I had given them every chance to prove me wrong. They had chosen their path. That night, I locked every door and checked every window twice. I sat by the staircase with the lights on, staring at the rug and railing until dawn. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If they thought I would fall into their plan quietly, they were wrong. A few days after that dinner, I ran into Rosa while I was walking back from the grocery store. She waved at me, her arms full of flowers she had just bought at the market. Rosa had been my neighbor for almost 20 years, and in many ways she was more family than the people who shared my blood. She took one look at me and frowned. "You look pale, Evelyn. Something is wrong. Don't tell me otherwise." I hesitated. But before I could answer, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I saw Marcus last week. He wasn't alone. He was with Sienna's father. They were standing outside the bank. Howard looked angry and Marcus was holding papers. It didn't look like casual business. It looked desperate." Her words cut deep, confirming the fears I had been trying to swallow. I asked softly, "You're certain it was the bank?" Rosa nodded. "I was right there." They went inside together. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could see it. Whatever it wasn't good news. I thanked her and carried my groceries home with shaking hands. Once inside, I set the bags on the counter and leaned against the sink, staring at the wall. Rosa's concern was genuine. She had nothing to gain by warning me, and her words lined up perfectly with what I already knew. That evening, Rosa came by with a small vase, the flowers she had bought earlier arranged neatly. She placed them on my kitchen table and sat down without asking. "I don't want to interfere, but I can't keep quiet. Marcus has changed. He doesn't look like the same young man I watched grow up. Something is pulling him down a path that scares me. I know you've noticed too." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. She leaned forward, her voice steady. "You need to be careful. If money is involved, people will do things you wouldn't believe, even family, especially family." Her warning lingered with me long after she left. I paced through the house that night, thinking about every detail. The way Marcus had avoided my eyes. The way Sienna had pointed out the rug at the stairs. The brochures of new houses slipped so casually into my hands. And now Rosa's words about the bank. It all added up to the same conclusion. They were drowning in debt, and I was their life raft. The next day I decided to test Marcus. I called him, my voice calm. "Son, I've been thinking about the house. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should consider selling. But I don't want to rush." He answered quickly, too quickly. "That's wonderful, Mum. You don't have to rush. But it's smart to think ahead. Let me talk to Sienna's father. He can guide you through the process." His eagerness chilled me. He didn't even pause to ask why I had changed my mind. He was ready, waiting, as if he had rehearsed this moment. Later that afternoon, Rosa stopped by again. She carried a plate of cookies and set it down, though her eyes stayed fixed on me. I need to tell you something else. I overheard Howard arguing with someone outside the store. He mentioned a large loan he couldn't cover. He said something about needing money fast, or they would lose everything. Evelyn, I don't want to alarm you, but I think their eyes are on you. I sat at the table and folded my hands tightly. I know, I whispered. Rosa reached across the table and gripped my wrist. Promise me you'll be careful. Don't eat or drink anything they give you. Don't go anywhere alone with them if it feels wrong. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Her words rang with urgency. I promised her I would be cautious, though inside I already knew it was too late to avoid the danger. It was already inside my life, spreading through every corner like smoke. That night, lying in bed, I thought of the years Rosa had been by my side. The afternoons we shared coffee, the times she helped me fix things around the house, the way she always remembered my birthday when my own family forgot. And now she was the only one standing between me and the darkness I could feel closing in. The following morning, I looked out the window and saw Marcus pull up in his car. He came in smiling, carrying a small bag of groceries. "Thought I'd bring you some things, Mom," he said. But his eyes darted quickly around the house, as if checking details again. He asked if the stairs still felt steady. He asked if the locks on the doors ever stuck. I gave vague answers, my face calm, though inside my heart pounded. As he left, Rosa's warning echoed in my head. Don't eat or drink anything they give you. Don't ignore your instincts. I had to listen. That evening, I called Rosa and told her everything that had happened at the restaurant, every word Sienna had said, every look Sobok Marcus had given me. She listened in silence, then spoke firmly. Evelyn, this is not just greed. This is a plan. They're building a story around you, shaping it so when something happens, no one will question it. You cannot face this alone. You need to protect yourself. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my living room. The lamp cast long shadows across the rug, the same rug Marcus and Sienna had pointed out. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. I realized then Rosa was right. They weren't waiting for an accident. They were preparing one. The next few days I lived cautiously, never fully relaxing. I checked locks twice, looked over my shoulder when walking home, and avoided being alone with Marcus or Sienna. Each time the phone rang, my chest tightened. Each time the doorbell chimed, my stomach knotted. I told myself I needed proof, something solid beyond suspicion and warnings. I needed to hear them speak with no doubt, to catch them in their own words. And until that moment came, I would wait, silent and careful, preparing for what I knew was coming. One evening, I decided to put Rosa's warnings to the test. I needed more than suspicion, more than a collection of uneasy moments. I needed proof. That was the only way I could protect myself. So I waited in my car outside Marcus and Sienna's apartment. The street was quiet, the lights from their window glowing faintly above. I knew they met with her parents often, and I suspected tonight would be one of those nights. I kept my engine off and sat low, watching until I saw them leave together, the four of them, walking to a black SUV parked down the street. My pulse quickened. I followed at a safe distance, careful not to get too close. They drove across town and parked behind a quiet office building. I waited until they went inside, then slipped out of my car and walked carefully around the side. The windows were dark, except for one near the back. I edged closer, staying low against the wall. Through the thin glass, I could see them gathered around a table. Papers were spread out. Marcus leaned over, pointing at something. I pressed closer, straining to hear. The muffled words sharpened when Sienna raised her voice. Are you absolutely sure no one will suspect anything when it happens? She asked. My body froze. I recognized the exact tone she had used before. Howard nodded, his hand heavy on the table. We've gone over this. It has to look like an accident, a fall down the stairs. At her age, no one will question it. Marcus spoke next, his voice steady in a way that made my stomach turn. Once the funeral is done, we sell the house. 450,000 from the property, plus the 60,000 in savings, plus the insurance. That puts us where we need to be. Enough to buy the new place and cover the debts. I felt the air leave my lungs. There was no doubt now, no misinterpretation. They were planning my death in detail. Denise, Sienna's mother, leaned in. Your uncle is desperate too. If Evelyn hesitates, Alvin and Patricia will push her. They've been waiting for a share since forever. My heart lurched. It wasn't just Marcus and Sienna. It wasn't just the Blakes. It had spread wider, reaching into the rest of the family I had trusted. Marcus nodded calmly. They're on board. Everyone benefits when this is over. He paused, his eyes narrowing. The important thing is timing. It can't look forced. She has to be alone when it happens. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. I crouched there in the dark, listening as they discussed my death like it was a business transaction. They spoke about details, about which night I was most vulnerable, about how to act shocked in front of neighbors afterward. Sienna laughed lightly. I'll even make sure to post something sweet about her that day. People will think I adored her. My stomach twisted. Howard closed the folder of papers. Then it settled. Within the month, this will be behind us. I stumbled back from the window, my legs shaking. I knew I had to leave before they spotted me. I hurried to my car, my breath short and ragged. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the wheels so hard they ached. Back in my kitchen, I collapsed into a chair. I replayed every word in my head, each one carving deeper into me. The child I had raised with every ounce of love in me was gone. What remained was someone who could calmly plan my death for money. The next morning, Rosa knocked at my door. She took one look at me and knew something had changed. I told her everything I had heard. I spoke quickly, my voice trembling. She listened, her hands clasped together tightly. When I finished, she whispered, "My God, Evelyn, they've already decided. This isn't just suspicion anymore." I nodded, my chest heavy. They're not waiting for me to stumble. They're preparing to push. We sat in silence for a long time. Rosa finally said, "You need to protect yourself. They won't stop. If you don't act first, they will." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My house no longer felt like home. It felt like a trap, each corner a place where an accident could be staged. The rug, the railing, the dim bulbs. They weren't flaws anymore. They were weapons, waiting to be used against me. But beneath the fear, something else took hold. A cold clarity, sharper than anything I had ever felt. I had spent my life sacrificing, bending, giving everything for others. Now those same people saw me as nothing more than a sum of money. If they wanted me gone, I would not give them the satisfaction. The proof I had gathered in my mind was enough for me to see the truth. My own family had turned into predators. I knew then I had to become something they did not expect. Not the tired mother they believed could be pushed aside. I had to become the one who would outthink them, outlast them, and make sure their plan would collapse on their own heads. The decision settled into me like iron. I was no longer waiting to see if they meant what they said. They had spoken clearly. They had shown me their intent. And I had finally accepted it. The game they wanted to play had already begun. The pressure from Marcus and Sienna grew stronger with each passing day. Their calls became more frequent, their visits more insistent. I could see the urgency in their eyes, the way they tried to mask their impatience with false warmth. They were running out of time, and they wanted to close in on me before I had a chance to resist. One afternoon, Marcus showed up without warning. He carried a slim folder and placed it on my kitchen table, as if it were nothing more than a casual delivery. "Mum, I brought something for you to look over," he said lightly. I opened the folder and saw legal documents, neat and formal, full of words about property transfers and authorization. My chest tightened. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. He leaned on the table, his tone careful. "It's just paperwork to make things easier for you. If anything happens, everything will already be in place. You won't have to worry about confusion later." I pushed the folder back toward him. "I'm not signing anything today." His jaw tightened, though his voice stayed calm. "I'm only trying to help. Think about it." Later that week, Sienna came by alone. She carried a small box of pastries, her smile sweet, but her eyes sharp. She set them on the table and sat down across from me. "I thought you could use a treat," she said. I thanked her, but didn't touch them. She glanced at the stairs, then at the hallway light. "It really is dangerous here, Evelyn. A loose step, a broken bulb. It only takes one moment. I don't know how you manage all by yourself." Her words were a mirror of what Marcus had said. The same rehearsed concern, the same reminder of fragility. I smiled faintly, but inside I knew she was tightening the net around me. Days later, Marcus called, his tone firm this time. "Mum, we need to go see a lawyer together. It's irresponsible not to have your will updated. I've already spoken to someone who can help." I told him I was busy, but he insisted. "Just one meeting. It won't take long." Against my better judgment, I went. We walked into a small office where a young attorney greeted us. Marcus did most of the talking. He explained that I needed to update my documents, make sure my wishes were clear. He handed the lawyer my information as if he were in charge of my life. The lawyer asked me simple questions, but Marcus answered half of them before I could. I sat there, listening, my anger growing beneath the surface. When the lawyer placed a draft in front of me, Marcus slid a pen across the desk. "All you have to do is sign here." I picked up the pen, stared at the paper, and then set it down. "Not today." The tension in the room sharpened instantly. Marcus's smile faltered, his knuckles pressing against the table. The lawyer looked confused, but I stood up calmly. "I'll think about it," I said, and walked out. That evening, I sat in my living room and thought about how close I had come to handing them everything. If I had signed that paper, I would have sealed my own fate. They would have no reason to wait for an accident. They could move faster, and no one would question a thing. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside. I looked through the window and saw shadows near the driveway. My heart raced as I turned off the lights and waited in silence. The figures moved slowly around the house, then disappeared into the night. When I checked the locks in the morning, one of the back windows had fresh scratches around the frame. They had been testing me, checking how easily they could enter. The next day, Rosa came over, alarm in her eyes. "I saw Marcus talking with your brother Alvin in the parking lot by the pharmacy," she said. "They were arguing about money. Alvin looked desperate." My stomach sank. I asked her what she had heard. "Something about your savings, about how they deserved their share. Evelyn, I don't like where this is going." I sat down hard in my chair. If Alvin was involved, that meant the circle was wider than I thought. The whispers about stinginess, the resentment he had carried for years, it all fit. He had joined them. That weekend, Marcus arrived again, this time with Sienna at his side. They walked through the house slowly, pausing at the stairs, the kitchen, the hallway. Marcus touched the railing as if measuring its strength. Sienna pointed at the loose rug again, her voice smooth. "This is exactly the kind of thing that can cause a serious accident. Maybe it would be best if you stayed with us until we find you a safer place." I shook my head. "I'm fine here." Sienna's smile vanished for a brief second, replaced by a flash of irritation. Marcus put his hand on her arm and said quickly, "We only want what's best for you, Mum." When they left, I locked the door and leaned against it, my body trembling. The truth was clear now. They were done, waiting. Their visits, the papers, the inspections of my home, all of it was preparation for what they intended to do. That night I made a choice. I could no longer sit quietly and hope for mercy. I had to prepare for them as they prepared for me. Their pressure had become a storm, pressing harder each day. But storms can be redirected. I would not be the victim they expected. The night after Marcus and Sienna walked through my home, pointing out every flaw, I sat in the dark and decided I would no longer play the role they had written for me. If they wanted an accident, they would not find me waiting. I would prepare in silence, gathering proof, building a defense they could never expect. The first step was to keep my face calm whenever I saw them. I had to look like the same trusting mother they believed I was. I knew if I showed fear or suspicion, they would shift their plan, make it harder for me to stay ahead. So I forced myself to smile when Marcus called, to answer politely when Sienna asked about my health. On the surface, I appeared compliant. Inside, I was sharpening every sense. I started writing everything down. Dates, times, words they used, the way they touched the railing, the way Sienna mentioned my stairs or rugs. Each note went into a small notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. I bought a simple recording device at a discount store and kept it in my pocket during their visits. I told myself I needed their voices, their own words, captured in a way no one could deny. Rosa helped me quietly. One evening I went to her house under the excuse of borrowing sugar. In her kitchen, away from curious eyes, I explained my plan. She listened, her face set in determination. "You can't face them unarmed," she said. "I'll help however I can." She loaned me a small camera her nephew had left behind, one that could be hidden among books on a shelf. I placed it in my living room, angled toward the staircase and the front entry where most of our conversations happened. The next time Marcus visited, he asked casually about the life insurance policy I had. He tried to make it sound like concern. "Just wondering if it's updated, Mum. These companies can be tricky. I wouldn't want you to lose money if something happened." I nodded and answered lightly, but my recorder picked up every word. After he left, I listened to it again, my stomach twisting, but also relieved that I now had his voice captured. I began to move differently through my house. I checked the locks twice before bed, kept the curtains drawn, and always carried my phone in my pocket. I knew they might try to catch me off guard, but I refused to give them that chance. I also prepared safe spaces. Rosa offered her spare room if I ever felt truly threatened. I kept a packed bag hidden near the back door with a change of clothes, my notebook, and the recording skis. For weeks, I played the role of the patient mother, while inside I was building a case against my own son. It wore me down, pretending to be at ease when every part of me was tense. Some nights I sat at the kitchen table staring at the folder Marcus had pushed in front of me, remembering how close I had been to signing. Other nights I sat by the staircase, looking at the rug, daring it to trip me, knowing they were waiting for that moment. One evening, Sienna stopped by again, this time without Marcus. She walked slowly through the living room, her eyes scanning the corners as if taking inventory. She asked me to sit with her and pulled out her phone, showing me listings of houses in new subdivisions. This could be yours, Evelyn. Imagine no stairs, no repairs, just peace. Wouldn't you feel better knowing Marcus didn't have to worry about you every day? I told her it was a nice thought. She smiled, satisfied, not realizing my camera had recorded the entire conversation. I knew I couldn't hold this secret war forever. They were growing bolder, pressing harder, but I had to wait for the right moment. I told myself I would not run, and I would not fall. They believed I was weak. They believed they could control the timing. That would be their mistake. At night, when sleep refused to come, I thought of all the years I had spent working for Marcus's future. The exhaustion, the hunger, the sacrifices. I thought of the way he once held my hand as a boy. Those memories hurt, but they also hardened me. If I had survived those years, I could survive this. By the end of the month, I had a folder of my own. Inside were notes, recordings, and images from the camera Rosa had given me. It was not yet enough to take to the police, but it was enough to remind me that I was not imagining things. Every detail pointed to the same truth. My son and his circle were planning to erase me. I kept my silence, but my resolve grew stronger. I would wait for them to believe they had me cornered. I would let them feel certain, and then I would strike with the truth they could not deny. The day of the family meeting arrived faster than I expected. Marcus called me early in the week, his voice filled with a forced warmth. "Mum, everyone should come together. We can talk about the future, make plans. It will make things easier for you." I agreed without hesitation, though inside I knew this was what I had been waiting for. They believed I was still playing the naive mother. They had no idea I had been preparing for this moment. The meeting was set at Howard and Denise's house. Their dining room had always been used for holidays and celebrations, but this time the atmosphere was different. When I walked in, I saw folders on the table, pens lined neatly, and glasses of water prepared as if it were a business negotiation. Marcus greeted me with a hug, his arms stiff. Sienna kissed my cheek, her smile practiced. Alvin and Patricia were already seated, their eyes heavy with expectation. I sat quietly, my recorder hidden in my bag, my phone on silent but ready. Marcus began almost immediately. "Mum, we want to help you get everything in order. It's time to update the paperwork, to make sure nothing gets lost later. We've all been talking, and we think it's best if we take care of it now." I looked around the table. Alvin avoided my eyes, staring at the papers in front of him. Patricia folded her arms, impatient. Howard leaned back in his chair, confident, while Denise tapped her fingers against the wood as if keeping rhythm. Sienna reached out and touched Marcus's arm. "It's the responsible thing to do," she said sweetly. I let them talk. I listened as Marcus explained how the house could be sold quickly, how the money could be divided, how everything would be fair. He used the word fair again and again, as if repeating it would make it true. Alvin finally spoke, his voice sharper. "It's not fair for one person to hold everything. We've all been left waiting while she sits on money she doesn't even use." His wife nodded firmly. "It's time for the family to get what it deserves." I kept my face calm. I let their words fall into the air, collecting like dust. Each one was proof, evidence of what they were after. When Marcus pushed the folder toward me, the papers inside ready for my signature, I smiled faintly. "You've put a lot of thought into this," I said softly. His shoulders relaxed, believing I was giving in. Sienna leaned closer. "All you need to do is sign, Evelyn. Then you won't have to worry anymore." We'll take care of everything." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint tick of the clock on the wall. My hand rested on the pen, but I did not lift it. Instead, I looked at each of them in turn, Alvin's restless fingers tapping, Patricia's narrowed eyes, Howard's smug grin, Denise's shallow breath, Sienna's expectant smile, and finally Marcus, my son, waiting for me to obey. Then I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands. "I think it's time we all tell the truth." Their smiles faltered. Marcus forced a laugh. "That's what we're doing, Mom. We're making sure everything is honest and clear." I reached into my bag and set a small recorder on the table. I pressed play. Their own voices filled the room, sharp and undeniable. Sienna's question, "Are you sure no one will suspect anything when it happens?" Marcus's calm answer, "She'll have a believable accident." Alvin's eager tone, "We all get our share." Patricia's cold words about me being stingy. Each phrase cut through the silence like a blade. The room froze. Sienna's face drained of colour. Alvin's mouth opened, then shut again. Patricia's eyes darted to the door. Marcus leaned forward, his voice strained. "Where did you get that?" "I heard you," I said simply. "Every word." The tension cracked wide open. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. "This is twisted. You're setting us up." Alvin hissed at her to be quiet. Howard tried to regain control, his voice booming. "This means nothing. Anyone can record. Anyone can twist words." I leaned closer. "You planned my death. You spoke of money before you spoke of love. You saw me as a sum, not a person. And now the truth is out." Marcus's voice broke, desperate. "Mum, it's not what you think. We were just worried about you." "Worried?" I whispered. "Worried enough to plan an accident? Worried enough to divide the money before I was gone?" Sienna's mask slipped. She snapped, her voice sharp. "You don't understand. We had no choice. The debts, the pressure. We needed a way out. You were sitting on everything while we were drowning." There it was, the confession. Not masked by fake smiles or gentle words. The raw truth spilled out in front of everyone. I stood slowly, sliding the recorder back into my bag. My hands no longer trembled. "You've shown me who you are. All of you." The room erupted in shouts. Patricia accusing me of betrayal. Alvin demanding fairness. Sienna pleading with Marcus to do something. Marcus calling after me as I walked to the door. But I didn't stop. I had heard enough. Outside, the air was cool against my face. I walked to my car with steady steps, the chaos of their voices fading behind me. I knew this was only the beginning. The confrontation had torn away the last mask. They would no longer pretend. The battle was fully exposed now, and I was ready for it. The night after the confrontation, I sat at my kitchen table with the recorder still in my bag. My hands rested on the wood, steady now instead of shaking. For weeks I had been the silent one, waiting, gathering, pretending. That silence was over. They had shown their true faces, and I no longer owed them mine. The following morning Marcus called. His voice was tight, nervous. "Mum, we need to talk about what happened last night. Things got heated. Let's not let it tear us apart." I listened quietly, then said, "You already tore it apart." I hung up before he could answer. By noon, Sienna appeared at my door. She wore her polished smile, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "Evelyn, you misunderstood. We were only trying to plan responsibly. That recording doesn't mean what you think." I stepped aside just enough for her to enter. She walked through the living room, glancing at the hidden camera she didn't know was there. She turned back to me, her voice sharper. If you make this public, you'll ruin Marcus. Do you really want to destroy your own son's life? Her words did not move me. I said, Marcus destroyed it himself. I just watched. She opened her mouth to argue, but when she saw my face, she left without another word. The pressure came fast after that. Alvin called 3 times, leaving messages full of accusations. You've always thought you were better than us. You'll regret this. Patricia followed with her own, cold and clipped. If you drag us down, you'll go down with us. Don't think anyone will believe your story. For the first time in months, I felt no fear. They had already underestimated me. They thought I would crumble, but each threat only hardened me. That weekend, Marcus tried again. He showed up with Howard, both of them walking into my kitchen like they still owned it. Marcus spoke first. Mom, we can still fix this. We'll drop everything if you just sign the papers quietly. No one has to know. I looked at them, then pulled the folder of notes and recordings I had kept for weeks. I placed it on the table. Do you want to see what I've collected? Every word, every visit, every time you tried to make me believe my home was a trap. Do you want to hear your voices describing how I should fall down the stairs? Howard stiffened, his jaw tightening. Marcus's face flushed red. He tried to smile, but the mask cracked. This will destroy all of us, he said. It already has, I replied. I stood, opening the front door. Get out. Neither of them moved at first, but when I repeated it, they left. I locked the door behind them, my heart pounding with anger, not fear. The silence that followed was heavy, but I felt clarity inside it. I no longer needed to prove anything to myself. They had confirmed everything. The only step left was to decide how public the truth should become. That evening I met Rosa at her kitchen table. I laid out the recordings, the notes, the photos from the hidden camera. She listened to each clip, her face darkening with every word. When the last recording ended, she looked at me firmly. This is enough to bury them. The question is, are you ready? I nodded slowly. I'm ready. We made a plan. The next time they gathered to push me again, I would not sit quietly. I would not whisper or hide. I would let the evidence speak for itself, and I would make sure they knew I was no longer theirs to control. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Marcus called 2 days later. We're meeting again. This time we'll finish everything. Be at the Blake's house on Saturday. His voice carried no room for refusal. On Saturday, I walked into their dining room again, but I was not the same woman who had entered before. They were all there, waiting with papers and pens. Marcus gestured to the chair. Sit, Mom. Let's settle this. I sat, calm. He began talking about signatures, about fairness, about responsibility. I let him go on until the words filled the room like smoke. Then I reached into my bag, placed the recorder on the table, and pressed play. The voices poured out once more. Sienna's cold question, Marcus's steady answers, Alvin's greedy insistence, Patricia's bitterness. Their own words filled the space. Undeniable. Undeniable. The room exploded. Patricia stood up, shouting. Alvin tried to cover it, claiming it was twisted. Howard slammed his fist on the table, demanding I stop. Sienna cried out that it was all taken out of context. Marcus shouted over them, his face red, his words desperate. I sat still, letting the chaos unfold. When their voices finally broke into silence, I said quietly, "The truth is not something you can shout away." For the first time, they understood I was not going to bend. The balance had shifted. They had pressed me for months, circling me like vultures. Now the weight pressed back on them, heavy and unrelenting. As I walked out of that house, the noise of their voices still echoing behind me, I felt no triumph, only certainty. The war they had started had reached its turning point. From here, the end would come quickly, and it would not be mine. The morning after I played the recordings in their dining room, I woke with a strange calm in my chest. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey waiting in the dark. I had confronted them, torn off the mask they wore so easily. Their plan was no longer hidden, and they knew I would not stay silent. The war had shifted, and now it was my turn to decide what to do next. Rosa came over with coffee, her face full of questions. "How did it go?" she asked as soon as I opened the door. I told her everything, the shouting, the denial, the look on their faces when they heard their own words played back. She shook her head. "They won't stop, but you've wounded them. They'll scramble now." She was right. By afternoon, Marcus called again, his voice smaller than before. "Mum, please, let's talk. We don't need to involve anyone else. We can fix this." I listened without replying. When he realized I wouldn't answer, he hung up. For the next few days, the house felt lighter. I no longer feared the stairs or the rug. I had taken away their secrecy, and with it, much of their power. Still, I knew it wasn't over. People who tasted greed rarely walked away empty-handed. They would try again. I spent those days preparing for my own future, not theirs. I contacted a realtor quietly, asking about selling the house on my terms. When she came by for an inspection, she admired the property, her eyes wide. "You could get close to 500,000 in this market," she said. I smiled faintly, thinking how that number had nearly become the price of my life. I also visited the bank to move my savings. I placed the 60,000 into a new account under a trust Rosa helped me set up. That way, even if Marcus tried to claim it, he would find nothing. Each step I took gave me more strength, more distance from their grip. By the end of the week, word spread through the neighborhood that I was considering selling. People asked where I would go, and I told them only that I was thinking of something smaller, simpler. The truth was, I no longer cared about the house as much as I cared about my freedom. This house had been my fortress, but it had also become my prison. I wanted to leave on my terms, not theirs. Marcus tried one last time. He came alone, his face tired, his suit wrinkled as if he hadn't slept. He stood on my porch and begged, "Mom, don't sell the house. Please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I'm still your son." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the boy he used to be hidden beneath the man who had betrayed me. My voice was steady when I answered. "You stopped being my son when you planned my death. You may carry my name, but you don't carry my love anymore." He flinched, his shoulders sagging. For a moment I thought he might argue, but instead he turned and walked down the steps without another word. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, breathing deeply. It was not joy I felt, but release. That evening I called Rosa and told her I was ready to move forward. Together we began looking for a small apartment across town, close to the library and park. A place where I could walk freely without glancing over my shoulder. A place where my life would no longer be measured in numbers whispered behind my back. The sale of the house moved quickly. Within weeks I had a buyer, a young family who looked at the rooms with wide eyes and excitement. Watching them reminded me of the years when my own future felt wide open. Signing the papers brought no sadness. Instead, it felt like closing the last door on a chapter that had already ended. When the final check cleared, I sat with Rosa and raised a glass of iced tea. To survival, she said. I added softly, to freedom. We laughed, but the sound was not bitter. It was clean, like air after a storm. I used part of the money to create something that mattered. A scholarship at the local high school for students who wanted to study, but had no means. I named it after my mother, who once told me that strength runs deeper than blood. The rest I tucked away, safe from greedy hands. I chose a small apartment with bright windows and no stairs. I filled it with simple furniture, nothing grand, but everything chosen by me. Each corner felt like my own, untouched by betrayal. When I sat in that new space, watching the sun pour through the curtains, I knew I had reclaimed what they tried to take. My dignity, my independence, my right to decide how my story ended. They had pushed me toward a grave, but I had walked into a new beginning instead. The months that followed were quiet in ways I had not known for years. The apartment felt safe, the light streaming through the windows each morning reminding me that I had chosen this life on my own. The house, the debts, the arguments, they were all behind me now. I had closed that chapter with my head high. Still, one part of the story had not ended. Marcus. I had not seen him since the day he stood on my porch begging me not to sell. I thought perhaps he had gone on with his life, burying what had happened. Then one evening, as I returned from the market, I found him waiting outside my building. He looked thinner, his face lined, his suit worn at the edges. When he spoke, his voice cracked. "Mum, I need to talk to you." I wanted to turn away, but something in his eyes stopped me. I led him upstairs, and we sat in my small living room. He looked around, taking in the modest furniture, the photographs I had hung on the wall. "It's simple, but it feels warm," he said softly. Then he lowered his head. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" I folded my hands in my lap, steady. "You chose a path that nearly destroyed me. But yes, you also ruined what we had." Tears filled his eyes. I was drowning. The debts, the pressure from Sienna and her family. I thought there was no way out. I let greed blind me. I let them convince me you were the solution, and I betrayed you. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in months, I saw not the man who plotted against me, but the boy who once clung to my hand at the bus stop. I took a slow breath. "You broke my trust. Trust is not something easily repaired, but you are still my son. I cannot erase that." He looked up, his eyes red. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No. Hate would mean I still let you control my heart. I don't hate you, but I will never let you use me again." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing the weight of my words. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mum. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to ask." I placed a hand on his arm, not with the softness of old days, but with a firmness that carried both love and boundary. "Forgiveness does not erase what you did. It means I choose to move forward without letting your choices poison me. You must live with what you tried to do. That is justice. Whether you change or not, that is up to you." He lowered his head again, shoulders shaking. For a long time we sat in silence. Finally he stood. "Thank you for letting me speak. I will try to be better." He walked to the door, paused once as if hoping I would stop him, then left quietly. When the door closed, I felt no anger, no triumph, only a strange peace. I had faced the storm and come through it whole. I had given him a chance to face the truth. What he did with that chance was no longer mine to control. In the weeks that followed, I continued building my new life. The scholarship fund began its first year, awarding 2 students full tuition for community college. Seeing their smiles, hearing their gratitude, filled me with more pride than any possession ever could. I no longer measured my life in what I had lost, but in what I was still able to give. Sometimes I thought of Marcus. I wondered if he truly changed, if he would ever find a way back to himself. I did not dwell on it. I had planted the seed of truth. The rest was his burden. As I sat by my window one evening, the city lights glowing in the distance, I whispered to myself, "Justice and forgiveness can live side by side." I had claimed both. I had protected my life, drawn my boundaries, and still chosen not to let bitterness consume me. That was the victory. If you've listened this far, thank you. Stories like mine remind us that family can betray, but strength and dignity can still lead us forward. I want to hear from you. What would you have done if your own child turned against you for money? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found meaning in my story, please like and subscribe so we can keep walking through these lessons together.